This is Heme.
And Jessica.
And you're listening to the Friendly Atheist Podcast. Please go to patreon.com/Friendly Atheist Podcast to support this show. Let me give a shout out to some of our recent supporters. They include Jeremy W., Gloria J., Andrew R., History Guy 67, John M., Kari B., Faith S., Erica C., Candace H., Trajan S., Krista B., and Soft Snackies for Quiet Breakies. I don't know what that means.
Soft Snackies for Quiet Breakies. I love that.
And I just want to give people a heads up. If you are in Minneapolis on Saturday, September 21st, I will be speaking there. It's an event where I'm talking about Project 2025. It is sponsored by Humanists Minnesota and Minnesota Atheists. So all those details will be in the show notes. Hope to see you there in person. I don't get out much.
No, you don't.
It'll be fun. There was a debate this past week.
Yeah, there sure was.
Did you watch it like I did, where you treat it like the Super Bowl with snacks and everything?
Yes,
and
wine.
Your body is clenching because you're like, there's too much on the line?
Yeah, yes. Yes and yes. It was really interesting. I didn't watch the Biden one because my little heart couldn't take it. And this one I was genuinely looking forward to for exactly the reasons that we saw play out on screen. Do you have any favorite moments?
I mean, I've seen enough coverage of it now where it was all fine because I'm just like, oh, she's good at this. Way better than I remember from her in any of the primary debates from like 4 years ago.
I bet she's better one-on-one than she is.
Yeah, that too.
That tracks with her skill set.
And she just seems like she's gotten better at this whole thing, and her prep seemed to work, and Trump was himself. Like, he wasn't at all good.
No.
He was batshit crazy.
He was insane. She did see, now in hindsight, she seemed very relaxed.
Yeah.
Considering.
I feel like when you're in a debate like that and you're like, I've seen this before, I prepped for this, I knew how he was going to act, so I have something ready to go. It's like, okay, good, you did your homework. That's how it should be. And I appreciated that. Will it change anything? Probably not, because there's every campaign for a president is like targeting 7 people in Wisconsin, and that's it.
Yeah.
And no one else matters. So, like, will it change any minds? I don't know. But if anything does, that would.
Yeah.
So
thank you. I mean, I really do hate when I get too optimistic and you come in to just make sure I still feel sad all the time.
That's my job.
No, my favorite part was the immigrants eating cats and dogs.
Yeah.
That was
screaming out that lie.
That
Trump.
was why. Actually, I lied. My favorite part was when Trump yelled about giving transgender operation to illegal immigrants in jail.
Which is just right-wing buzzwords.
Just strung together.
And if the argument is, yeah, even incarcerated people deserve health care, which I think is the point she had previously made, and trying to skew that into like, oh, look, it's whatever they say. I appreciate that Trump only says things that only make sense in right-wing crazy bubbles.
Yes.
And when normies hear it, it's like, the hell is wrong with you?
Yeah. It true. Like, I think that's a very good example of that's exactly right. Of like when you step out of the echo chamber, all of a sudden somebody hearing that people are eating cats and dogs when there's no evidence. And he's like, somebody called me or whatever.
He only ever talks as if he is at one of his own rallies. And when there's no audience and moderators who are just like,
that's
we're here
right.
to, it's not true. And we'll just call it out because that's fucking crazy. It doesn't work well for him.
No.
He needs positive reinforcement because he's too used to it, and he's not used to people just trashing you every time you say something stupid.
Well, or he's used to people like lowering themselves to his level, right? Like she did not
which is what you expect in like a Republican primary.
Yeah, 100%. I'm just like, oh, your son is gay, so whatever. Like, I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, I found her to be extremely confident and competent and chill.
Yeah.
And her side eye, her smirks were all very good without being like performative. Like it was clearly like she was hearing things and going like, what the fuck?
If you're already predisposed to not like her, you'll point to whatever you want to point to.
Right.
But it looks like the instant reactions were not favorable to him, so yay.
I really liked that people are accusing her of bringing on notes.
Even though she needed notes for basic questions like your abortion policy, question mark?
Actually, that's such a good point of like, I don't know that maybe like specific numbers, but what notes do you need to debate Trump? Like, you just need to sort of highlight his
I mean, that was
general
Biden's problem. Biden focused too much on trying to get numbers out there as if anyone cares.
No, not, yeah.
And I
that's
think
not
she
gonna
got
do
the
it.
memo that, no, vibes matter more.
Vibes are
so
important.
Get your shit together, but also how you convey it matters.
And what I found very telling is he is doing the same old thing that no matter what anybody accuses him of, he accuses everybody else of.
Yeah, it's all projection.
It's
all
really
the time.
wild of like, she has no plan. She has no plan. Like,
what's your plan? I have concepts of a plan.
that
Right.
was very good.
Yeah.
Concepts of a plan was very good.
I wanted to give you an update on a story we talked about last week because there's actually some interesting news here. So last week we talked about satanic chaplains possibly going into Florida
in
schools.
Florida, yeah.
The quick recap is that this is in Osceola County, Florida, where 2 weeks ago they had a board meeting and they were like, should we bring chaplains into our schools? Because Ron DeSantis and his Republican legislature signed a law saying Florida schools could bring Christian chaplains. Christian wasn't written, but it's implied.
Religious, yeah.
Yeah, religious chaplains into public schools. DeSantis signed that into law. He signed it at a high school in Osceola County. Like, that was, and he also said at that same place where he signed that law, no, Satanists can't be part of this. That's not a real religion. Of course not.
Unfortunately, that's not how the world works.
Right. And then this school district was saying, well, school's starting now. We need to figure out, are we going to do this or opt out of it? And the school district was considering, well, if you allow chaplains into the school, into the district, what are the policies we're going to have in regards to that? And the DeSantis administration last week, they released a model policy that school districts could copy and paste and change how they wanted it to. But even that policy made it sound like, I'm pretty sure this is unconstitutional as written. Your template
Which is
bad.
ironically something they learn about in high school. It's the Constitution.
I know, right? So the template was bad, which made this school district say, are we just adopting what they gave, or are we going to make changes to it? Should we form a committee to decide what to change? Because if you allow chaplains, but you find a way to exclude certain groups, that's possibly a lawsuit.
Yeah.
If we allow certain groups in, well, what are the standards we're going to use? Are there certain standards that only allow Christians in and keep out everyone? That was the mess they were trying to decide. Should we wade into this at all?
Do you think,
And last week when we talked, they decided on a 3-2 vote, let's delay this for now. We'll come back to it in 2 weeks. That's the update I have for you.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh, okay, that's
so we'll
great.
talk about that.
Do you think that the people who are trying to make this law think that there is some path to legally saying only Christians can be in the school? Like, do you think they just need to find the right combination of words to make it okay?
I'm pretty sure that's what Republicans thought they could get away with. If they, for example, their model policy said, well, any chaplain that wants to volunteer has to have like a couple years of experience and they must have a degree from a religious institution. Didn't say Christian. It's like, well, who do you think sets up seminaries and has the infrastructure?
They have a ton of satanic seminary schools.
Which, by the way, great idea. But that was the concern. So anyway, they met again this week. And really, once again, when they got to the public comments section, there were so many people speaking out saying, this is a bad idea. Don't do it. Not for the legal reasons, but just saying we don't need this. We have professionals in our schools. The kids need better than these people who just want to indoctrinate children. By the way, one of the other things in the model policy was that principals could have veto power over certain volunteers if they felt, well, your thing doesn't match up with our district's or our school's mission. It's like when you give principals that power, now they're picking and choosing religions.
I've always said that school principals need much more power.
So the main guy that they were all trying to talk to at this meeting was one of the board members named John Arguello, who was the main proponent of the chaplaincy program. And at the previous meeting, we mentioned this last week, this is a guy who said kids need chaplains because they were supposedly telling people, quote, I want to be chemically castrated because I'm a transgender ideologist. And then the same guy said his fellow board members would, quote, pay for the Uber to send that student to go to the clinic. Which is not how anything works.
I'm so sorry. What are you talking about?
I'm talking about right-wing echo chambers where they think kids go to school, their teachers convince them to be trans, and then their teachers, like, I don't know, perform the surgery during lunch period. Something like that. I think that's how they think it happens.
Like the idea of people walking around saying, like, please castrate me. I am a trans activist, not like I'm a trans
and I'm 14.
person.
Well, there are no such thing as trans people who are not activists in their world.
Oh, you can't just be trans and just live your fucking life?
No, not an option in right-wing echo chambers. So everyone's like targeting this guy specifically in their speeches, saying, here's why this is a bad idea. I don't know if there were Satanists speaking this week, but there were humanists speaking this week. There were a lot of other chaplains speaking and saying, yeah, we don't belong in your schools.
That's the frustrating thing is that we've seen that all along, I think in Texas as well. They were like, please don't make us do this. We don't want to do this thing, and we're not good at it.
So here's what Arguello was...
literally the only person who wants this to happen is like one dude, and everybody else is like, dog, please.
And he has one ally who is someone Ron DeSantis appointed to their board because there was a drop and he had to appoint someone, whatever. But there are 2 DeSantis people on that board and 3 others... Anyway. 3 other
human beings.
With
their souls intact.
Arguello, his proposal here, it's not like we're going to snap our fingers, take a vote, and then chaplains are allowed. They still don't have a policy yet. His proposal is let's form a committee to hash out everyone's concerns, report back to the board after, I think, like 6 weeks. The problem with his proposal is what is it that you think needs to be hashed out? Because no one can even agree.
It's a very two-at-end situation. Yeah, okay, and then what?
There's no resolution that's going to be okay here because the premise is broken. And Arguello made clear through repeated references to Jesus that if they approve any sort of policy, Christian zealots are going to overwhelm the system because they would be allowed to proselytize to kids. Even if the kids need parent permission, think about what would happen if parents said, I give permission for my son or daughter to meet with a chaplain. Why? Well, my son says he's gay and I need a Christian chaplain to talk him out of it or something like that. That's kind of the fear that some people have.
You know, it's so funny when I think about this shit that you and I are arguably the only people in this situation who work with teenagers who are discussing this right now. And I, as somebody who, and we both have situations where we're working with teenagers in like extracurricular activities, right? So we're not in school. Well, you're physically in school. Anyway, I am so fucking careful about what I tell these kids. And like, if I say something that's my opinion, I like really, really try to make sure I'm not like proselytizing these kids. I'll tell them my opinion and explain why I think it. But like, I'm really wary of crossing boundaries for parents, especially with religious kids, or not like with religion in general. I don't know. I just don't. I cannot imagine.
If they open the door to this, there's nothing stopping a megachurch from just saying, hey,
this is our school now, baby.
Yeah. Hey, men of our church, come outside the door after service today. You're all chaplains now. We're going to grant, here's a little certificate we printed out. Take it to your local school district. You're all chaplains. Go sign up on that list.
Congratulations.
And as soon as you get inside that door, win us some converts, whatever it is. So after all these people spoke for like an hour at the board meeting this week, Arguello then spoke up before the vote where he's trying to, he basically said all of his critics were basing their criticisms on, quote, lies and fear. No citations, really.
No, really? Weird.
He also said some people just don't like it. Even though you need parent permission to meet with the chaplain, he argued that some of these critics just don't like it when you talk to your parents, as if that's the reason they don't like what he's proposing. Like,
they don't like it when the chaplains talk to
No,
their
when
parents?
the kids talk to their parents, they want to cause a rift or something. I don't know. He made stuff up. He also tried to discredit professional psychologists who spoke out against the policy. I'm going to play you a bit of what Arguello said in a rant after all the public comments, the vast majority of which said, yeah, this is a horrible idea. Don't try to form a committee. Just don't do this. Here's part one of what he said.
This is a very important issue, and it should not be a discussion that happens based on lies. And the opposition to this program is basing so much of their opposition on lies and fear. That's how you know. This judge just came up here and lied about what the program would do in terms of a legal aspect, okay? There's nobody trying to proselytize your child because they can't even see a chaplain without permission of the parent, okay, period.
That's right.
So your child has to go and seek it out, and the parent has to provide permission. Now, I know that there's some people on the opposition side, they don't like it when you talk to your parents.
Thank you.
And that's not a positive thing. Any psychiatrist that can come here and talk about the damage that this may cause is absolutely ridiculous. It's the same as the doctor that came here during COVID and said that if you didn't mask your child, you didn't love your child. It's just as ridiculous.
I want to circle back to that last part really quick.
That's
During
a lot of words that he said, and I'm not sure any of them were coherent words.
Yeah. He said at the end there that during the pandemic, there was a psychologist, I guess, who showed up at a board meeting and basically said, if you're going to return to school, like near after school had been out for a while, if you're going to return to school, kids need face masks, which is true. That was healthy for everybody involved. And I guess, I didn't check this, but I guess some psychologists said if you don't put face masks on your kids, I guess for non-medical reasons, but they have to have it, you don't love your kids.
Do you think he actually said that, or do you think this gentleman extrapolated somebody saying if you want to protect your kids, masks are the way to go? I just always assume he's lying.
But this idea that, they wanted you to mask your kids, and now they're saying they don't need a chaplain, or just crazy right-wing nonsense. A lot of insults.
Here's some things that I believe that are not based in reality or are popular, and I'm going to get big mad about all of them and string them together as if they're the same thing.
So then another board member spoke out against the chaplaincy program with basic, coherent, totally sensible arguments as to we don't need this, we're doing fine, we have great people on our staff already who do this work. And then Arguello spoke up one more time.
Oh, good.
And this time, he's really big mad.
That wasn't him mad?
That wasn't him mad. This is him mad.
Okay, so you're right. You are a waste of oxygen. These kids are suffering pain right now, and you're part of the reason that they're feeling pain. So here's the fact. Here's the fact. Yeah, that's right. Because there's men of zero character in positions of leadership. That's why our kids are suffering. There's men who can't stand up, who have no spine. There's women who can't act like women. There's all kinds of problems just because the adults here are failing the kids.
You went to jail for not paying.
So here's the fact. The fact is this program doesn't do any of the things that they're saying. They're all lies, and that's a tool of the devil, and that's why they use it so well. And that's who's inspiring them. The fact is this would help our kids, and you guys say no. And then you think it's a coincidence that one guy is not here who voted for it every time, and then this guy changes his mind? Everybody here is for sale, and this is a facade. There's only one thing that's not a facade.
Me.
And that's Jesus Christ. And you know what? I'm happy to fight for this.
I mean, that last little bit.
Was that a Christopher Guest movie that I just listened to a clip of?
It would have been better if it were.
Oh my God, did this take place in Blaine, Ohio?
So after all of this, they finally rushed through and they're like, all right, we're done now. Like, let's take a damn vote on this thing. And one board member was missing, but they still need a majority of the remaining board to, get a committee formed.
And the one guy who's missing is the guy who agrees with our villain?
The one person missing had voted no last time, or voted to delay the vote last time. So they took a vote. Doesn't matter.
Them of?
The vote happened. The vote happened,
Yeah.
and it was 2-2, which is predictable. It was the same vote as last time, but they didn't get a majority, and so that puts an end for now to this conversation. Unless
That's great news.
It's great news. Right now, it means I don't know if they're going to bring it up again in the future. But
I can't imagine they're ever going to have this kind of political momentum again for this sort of bullshit. I don't know. Maybe I'm talking out of my ass.
It's Florida. Who knows?
Yeah, Florida's
turns
hard
out
to
being
predict.
a total asshole to everybody didn't win this guy the support he needed.
It's so weird.
Even when he was an asshole in the name of Jesus.
I think my favorite part was, which you could hear me hollering, was when he said something about Jesus and one dude clapped. That was extremely good.
He had his support there. But again, those people in the audience cheering this on, they're not the ones whose votes matter. Same with the critics for what it's worth, but the critics did get their say. It probably didn't help matters that the Satanic Temple earlier that day of the board meeting sent them another letter warning them about the legal battles they could face if any future policy excluded them in any way. And speaking to one of the board members who was one of the no votes on this stuff, My understanding is they're not concerned about the Satanists getting on board so much as we're putting ourselves in legal liability, and it's the board's job to protect the district from making unnecessarily stupid decisions. So that's why they voted against this policy. They don't need it. Why invite it into the system?
And it's worth noting that if this policy went through, which looks like it won't, thank goodness, they're opening themselves up to a shit ton of lawsuits that it's going to cost them, frankly, millions of dollars.
Yeah, and even if their insurance, boards have insurance for this stuff, but even if it's that,
listen,
it doesn't help the kids. And if you are a board member who cares about kids, there are many things a board could be doing to help students, and this is not one of them. Go hire more social workers. Go find qualified people to do the work that needs to be done. No one's speaking out against that.
Yeah.
It's you don't need to invite randos from the community to do the work that your staff already does.
Yeah, that's wow. Like, because if they really cared, they would be going back in the pipeline a little bit and saying, how can we encourage young people to get more interested in working with kids or getting in psychology, getting in school counseling? Not, well, we don't have any right now, so why don't we just grab some dudes off the street, throw them in an office?
Yep, and put a little hat on them and across.
Do they get to wear a little hat?
Maybe.
Aw, I would love that. I think Christians famously don't wear hats for any reason.
They should. They should. Why not? Let's talk about public schools while we're on the subject. This seemed like a good segue. We talked about this about a year and a half ago, but last year the Washington Post ran this really interesting article. It was about a fundamentalist Christian couple, 4 kids. They had homeschooled their kids. This is a couple that's about as conservative as you could get. Their names are Christina and Aaron Bial. But they were both products of Christian homeschooling, both products of fundamentalist Christian culture. And for example, they believed, or at least grew up believing, birth control is evil, creationism is true, dinosaurs were on Noah's Ark. They thought public schools were, quote, indoctrination camps, basically run by the government to turn kids against Jesus. And so they figured, okay, we're married now, we're having kids of our own, of course we're going to homeschool our kids. That's what we were raised with. But then they grew up a little bit in their marriage. They grew up. They started questioning certain aspects of their upbringing. Like, for example, one of them, at least one of them, was like, it facilitated abuse in my church and in homeschooling, or I heard about abuse in my church. They were sheltered from scientific realities. They didn't necessarily agree with all the archaic gender roles. And as it turned out, they now lived in a community that actually had really good public schools. So they did start homeschooling their kids. They had 4, all roughly the same age. And the article in the Washington Post that we talked about last year basically said their oldest daughter was about to start first grade, to give you an idea of the ages. And they were like, maybe we should send her to the public school because we keep hearing good things about it from our neighbors and all
really good
that.
story.
But they were worried. And the article kind of covered, like, really? These parents are sending their kids to a public school? What's going to happen? Like, are they going to be okay with this?
Who was reporting on this? Was this a mainstream or was this a Christian?
No, Washington Post, regular mainstream journalism. And what they found is that their daughter loved the school. Her teachers loved her. She made new friends. She became a better reader, which was important. And what they learned is that pretty quickly, all the fears they were brought up to think about public schools, they kind of faded away. And in the article, they mentioned, this is the husband, Aaron. People who think the public schools are indoctrinating don't know what indoctrination is. We were indoctrinated.
They said that they felt lied to, right?
Yeah.
That public schools were not trying to, turn their kid trans whatever.
And the article noted that any doubts they may have had about the public school were, quote, usually silenced by their wonder and gratitude at the breadth of their children's education. And the wife, Christina, she even began volunteering in the classroom.
Wow.
So, like, cool, very interesting article. And what I wrote, what I talked about with you at the time is that, look, any public school, like any institution, they have flaws. They should not be immune from criticism. But we also know the Christian right has spent decades lying about the extent of those problems or making up stuff wholesale out of whole cloth, like to an audience of believers predisposed to hating anything connected to the government. They demonize hardworking teachers and administrators. They try to take over school boards in order to replace expertise with like right-wing indoctrination.
Right.
We talked about this last month. Kirk Cameron was on a podcast where he said kids who attend public schools will come out of them as, quote, little Marxists, little atheists, drag queens, strippers, drug dealers.
I loved
And
that.
it's like, this is kindergarten,
Wasn't that a
buddy.
fun day for us?
Yeah. So at the same time, homeschooling has its own set of problems, which we've heard horror stories about time and time again. We talked about this last year. There was a homeschooled Christian woman who wrote back like several years ago, but how her parents said, make your own transcript.
Yes. Oh, I forgot about
Yeah.
this. Sucked.
There's a very powerful lobby called the Homeschool Legal Defense Association that fights against any kind of oversight on parents who want to homeschool their kids.
Yeah.
Like some states are like, just let us know that your kid is learning reading and math. And these people are like, how dare you intrude on my religious freedoms?
Yeah.
And the problem with no oversight is it allows abusive behavior, physical, educational abuse, to just kind of remain hidden from public view because no one knows what's going on.
I feel strongly that this sort of behavior and policy, I guess, for lack of a better word, is what happens when you treat your children like accessories of your life and not like
Not their
whole
own
ass
people
human beings.
who
Don't you
deserve
think?
an education? Yeah.
Because when you're thinking about like a parent, I want to control what my kids do, like that makes some sort of sense. But when you speak to people, like somebody in our Facebook group told us a story. It was one of those like they told a story thinking it was funny, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry." Like that thing of like this person grew up and like obviously now is like a full person with skills and everything, but just like we're so deeply far behind where they're supposed to be that it hindered their progress of life. And like, she's a whole ass human person. She isn't the daughter of whomever as his accessory.
Right.
Like these kids deserve every opportunity to be educated and get out if that's what they want to do.
And if homeschooling does that and it educates the kids, fine. But I don't think it's asking a lot to say, fine, then you have to fill out some sort of paperwork so we know what's going on. And then you get to do that. Just like we say nonprofits should tell us how much money's coming in and going out. Like religious groups should not be carved out and get special treatment.
Yeah.
But that's what happens with homeschooling too. So with all that in mind, there was an essay published online this week in Christianity Today, which serves a predominantly white evangelical audience.
What, really?
And it's written by their theology editor, Stephanie McDade. And here's the headline: Public school can be a training ground for faith. And basically her argument is we might want to consider public schools. They're not the worst.
It sounds like she's saying that kids should proselytize in school.
It
That's
is-
what it made me feel like when you said that.
It's less about that and saying, here's her, I'm trying to give you the best version of her argument.
Okay.
And I think her argument is, look, at some point, as much as we want our kids to be raised Christian, they're gonna have to break out of the bubble.
Yeah.
Now, it's our choice as Christian parents when they break out of that bubble. And what we are learning is that if we homeschool them forever through high school and then they go to college somewhere else,
Those kids are going to wild out.
that culture shock has been really bad for us because they're not prepared for what's out there and their faith dissipates and all that stuff.
As somebody who went to a college in Indiana, I can attest to the fact that the kids with the most conservative religious upbringings were the ones who lost their fucking minds for those first few months of college.
believe it.
They could not cope.
Yeah.
Because
And-
they went from having like guardrails on every single thing they did to literally no supervision.
and no one's watching over them.
Nobody, and they never learned how to like not
Moderate
moderate
themselves.
themselves. Thank
Yeah.
you. It just
And if you
it's-
send them to a fundamentalist Christian college, well, guess what? At some point, they're going to graduate from there too. At some
Yeah,
point,
they're
going
gonna
to be
enter
in
the real world.
And when that happens, if we haven't prepared them for life outside the bubble, it's not good for our faith because when they have the chance, when they get some freedom, as you just said, like they're going to go wild.
Yeah.
So her argument from a Christian theologian point of view
Sure.
is the earlier you let them get out of the bubble, it's probably better as Christians to solidify their faith. And she's saying
that's a compelling argument.
She's saying I would rather do that from a young age, like kindergarten, at a public school when they're still under my roof. And that if there are any doubts about religion or they come across something that they're having problems with, their parents are there and they will still talk to us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's her argument.
And like your kids are coming home at the end of every day. It's not like you're sending them to boarding school.
Right. And she writes that the Christian case for public schooling is worth revisiting. All of this boils down to maybe public schools are okay. Now, I wish she would call out some of those lies in the evangelical world about public schools. She doesn't touch them.
No, of course
doesn't
not.
cover them at all.
That throws people's defenses up. She's trying to sort of like
lure
them in.
She doesn't have any criticisms about homeschooling in this article. Mostly, she just argues that public schools are worth looking at as a test of faith because kids get to experience being outside the bubble in an environment where not everyone shares their beliefs.
Right.
They might be asked, why do you believe whatever it is you believe? And they are going to have to answer that. Whereas if you go to a Christian homeschooling environment or even a small Christian community or a Christian college, no one's asking you why you believe any of this stuff. They just expect you to believe
you never have you never have to think twice about
you never have to defend your faith.
Yeah.
And she's saying if they have to do that at a young age, they actually become better at defending their faith because they'll be forced to do it repeatedly. She and her husband don't have school-age kids yet, but she says when my kid's old enough to go, we're probably going to send her to public school. Maybe that'll change. Who knows? She also says, she writes about her own transition from she moved, I guess, in the middle of 6th grade. So she had been homeschooled.
6th grade. Ugh.
I mean, that sucks if you're moving in the middle of 6th grade.
I hated junior high.
So she's saying she was homeschooled in Florida up until that point, and they moved to the Pacific Northwest, where she attended public school, which there are so many ways that change sucks for anybody.
That's culture shock.
Huge. And she said it was really tough on me because she took her religion very seriously. I guess as seriously as any 12-year-old could possibly do it.
I've met very serious 12-year-olds.
This is where it kind of I started rolling my eyes. I don't know if it's justified, but she says she was bullied as a result of it because being a white Christian, being a Christian is very hard anywhere. She also said it took time for her to figure out how to stand up for herself.
Was she bullied because she was Christian, or was she bullied because she was a weird homeschooled new kid in Pacific Northwest? She's from Florida.
Well, I'll tell you what she said in a second.
I got fucking bullied. I wasn't homeschooled.
Yeah, it would have been easier, she writes, if she always attended public schools and was kind of used to this. But she wrote, once I was regularly provoked at school, I had to learn why I believed what I believed. I had to make my faith my own. With my parents' guidance, I began reading apologetics books so I would know how to respond when someone attacked my views. That decision began a trajectory that led to who and where I am today, serving as theology editor at Christianity Today. So she's saying, because I was thrown into the fire, so to speak, I became better at defending my faith to the point where I literally do that for a living. Okay, fine, I guess.
I would hope that a young person, instead of reading books about how to defend their faith, read books about why they believe what they believe and why it's good.
Like I said, this is not an argument for why you need to break out of your bubble.
I'm sorry, this isn't fair of me. Go ahead, keep going.
But then, look, bullies suck. Being different sucks. Middle school sucks. Getting picked on by middle school bullies because you're different sucks. So I get that. And one upside to all of that is if you can make it through any of that, you may come out stronger on the other side.
Why do you think I'm funny? It's not because I was raised funny. It's because nobody liked me.
And at the same time, though, I don't know. This is where I was rolling my eyes. How hard is it to be a Christian, really, even in Washington State? I'm sure young Muslims who go to school in red states, would do anything to experience the sort of backlash she faced as a young Christian in the Pacific Northwest. Even her anecdotes read to me like a God's Not Dead script, including her mention of a teacher who wrote in her yearbook, "Don't be hindered by dogma," which I'm like,
no, she didn't.
You
think?
No, I didn't think. Again, rolled my eyes. But I'm like, look, even if she did that, I'll say, fine, that's inappropriate. But also, if that's the worst you had to deal with.
Yeah, I can think of 3 teachers in junior high off the top of my head who talked actively about God and asked me personally whether I believed in God. So yeah, I'm sure it was really hard for this Christian.
But okay, let's set that aside.
In junior high, I didn't even know I was an atheist. What are you supposed to say when your 6th grade teacher says, "Boomkey, do you believe in God?" As a joke? It was weird and scary.
So, yes. I get where she's coming from. She was a believer at a young age. Going to public school where not everyone was Christian helped her strengthen her faith. And then she says, this is kind of the gist of the article, more Christians should consider public schools for kids for that reason. Because like we said, they're going to leave their bubble at some point. Here's what she wrote. Think of it like strength training. Your children need to build muscles of faith, and public school can provide weight to lift while you are around to spot them. Let them wrestle with worldly counter-narratives to God's truth while they are still under your care. That may feel risky, but the alternative, keeping them sheltered, then letting them be exposed to everything all at once when they leave home for work or college, is risky too. To which I would say, since it's people like us who are the risk she's worried about.
That's fair.
I can safely say I think your fears are overblown.
Yeah.
If your kids need theological armor to protect themselves from what? Reality? Or like the obvious questions posed by people who don't share them? Or like, why are you a bigot? I mean, that's a fair question. Well, then maybe it's your faith. That's the problem.
Kind of sitting with this, and it makes a lot more sense why, like, right-wing Christians are so ill-equipped to deal with reality or hear anything that's even lightly critical of something they believe in, is because their faith was never tested in any way. And so sounds very Christian of me. I would argue that if your faith is based on something as movable as just like, I'm a kid who doesn't really understand something.
And you have to defend it.
And then you have to defend it through adulthood without really understanding
Tell me
what
why
the
you
criticisms.
don't like your gay friends. Tell us what you think about what women ought to do later in life.
Like tell me what
how much control you want over women.
Or just like how every day, how is your faith being like fucking tested or whatever?
Well, you had to read a book in English class.
Yeah,
it was
hate
very
reading.
hard. And again,
I'm halfway through my LBJ book, the first one.
Congratulations.
It's so long, but I like it.
I'm telling you, it's
the
very
problem
good.
is I keep trying to talk to people about LBJ, and guess who doesn't want to talk about LBJ?
Humans.
Anyone.
Yeah. And I would also say, like, if your faith is under attack, it's because students today, in my experience anyway, they're much more tolerant of those types of differences, including religious ones. And those only really become a problem if someone's trying to force their faith on others. Like, being annoying is a far bigger liability in middle school than being Christian.
What a good point,
Right?
Hammond.
Thank you.
Honestly, that's probably true almost anywhere in the world, but like especially in junior high.
Yeah.
Woof.
I mean, my kids are not being raised with religion or atheism,
But they're really annoying.
Of course, they're kids. But like, I have spent 0 nights worrying about, oh no, they might be exposed to their friends' religious beliefs. Because again, I don't care. They're not going to be forced to adopt my views.
The last time I hung out with your kids, your oldest daughter quizzed me about her life.
Oh, nice.
Do you know when my birthday is? Do you know my favorite color? And I told her, your dad never talks to you.
The only trivia that matters.
It was really funny. I love how narcissistic kids are. It's great.
Oh, it's great. Let's grant her the premise.
Is it storming because I said a bad word? Yeah, kid. You fucking did it.
The idea that Christians should not be afraid to break out of their bubbles, you know what? I agree. That's a good premise. It is good for the kids. It's good for the people around her kids for the exact same reason, because they need to experience other people too. So I do appreciate a Christian writer urging other Christians to at least consider sending their kids to public schools. Like, the water is warm, you can come in, it's not that scary.
I have a big question.
Yes.
Does this author have children?
Yeah.
And where do they go to school?
She said, I think they have one kid. She said, my daughter's not old enough to go to public school yet. So when she's ready at that age, the plan is to send her to a public school.
That'd been a really fun twist if she was like, but my kids are at a private Catholic school in Connecticut.
The whole reason she's saying this is, here's what I'm doing,
Sure.
and I think you should do it too. I would say if the only reason you're sending your kids to a public school is to like inoculate them against people of different faiths, then maybe your priorities are a little broken, because there are actually excellent, positive reasons to send your kids to public schools, but none of that got any column space in this article. I do not get what the use is of telling readers of Christianity Today to consider public schools if you're not also at the same time going to debunk all the lies that are told to those people by evangelical pastors routinely and falsely.
I think it's also worth noting that not every homeschooler is religious.
Right? They're not. We've heard from many of them.
One of my students is homeschooled, and she was like, my mom wants me to go to junior high next year. I was like, oh my God, that sounds terrible, I guess. Where would you go? And she goes, Gower, which is where I went, and I could not stop laughing. I was like, Gower is truly the most middle of the road, like fine
Right,
school.
what is it that you're
There's
afraid of?
nothing scary.
Yeah.
It's not.
So,
anyway,
like I said, the piece doesn't have a lot of
face
substance.
there when she said Gower was like, it was like she said Voldemort for the first time.
The piece didn't have much substance to it, but I do get the premise. Again, fine. But,
I'm not mad at the substance of it.
Right-wing Christians lost their shit
Really?
over this article. And I'm just
What are their criticisms?
Some of the responses. I will read you some.
Because it seems like such a nothing burger of
Yes.
a thing of like, hey, maybe we should consider that exposing your kids to different cultures as a young person is probably better for them and their faith in us.
These are some of the random Twitter responses that
God.
got traction anyway. Sending your child to public school is like sending an untrained soldier into battle. You need to realize your kids aren't a missionary to public schools. They're the mission field.
What does that mean? What's a mission field?
Other heathens will convert your child if you send them
Oh,
there.
they're going to go from converters to convertees.
Yes. Someone else writes, oh, yes, what could possibly go wrong handing your children over to people who hate God and want to train them in paganism for 1,260 hours every year for a minimum of 13 years?
Sorry, did you say year with a British accent?
Yes.
Yeah.
Someone else chimes in, sounds like pedo stuff. One rule I know to be true, never trust an adult telling you to send your kids into the den of lions.
These people really like to work in metaphors and like symbolisms, and I don't love
And
it.
also, guess what? You're going to have a far worse time sending them to a private Christian school.
Yeah, because if
I
your
could send you the arrest records.
Yeah,
What
if
do you
your-
want?
I'll tell you what, if your kid gets raped, they're not going to get any help in your Christian school.
And if they're assaulted by someone who works at the school, guess what?
that guy gets promotion.
Here's another one. Sending them to public school largely removes them from your care and puts them in the care of God haters. You bloody idiots, millstones for you all, which is vaguely a death threat, according to the Bible.
I guess. I actually saw a real millstone in Springfield, Illinois. They're very
Yes.
big. Would you
Yeah,
believe that?
There you go.
Super big.
Here's another one. Yes.
No, go ahead.
We see you. We see what you've done, are doing, and will continue to do. You are either an unwitting pawn or an intentionally malign influence on Christianity. ... Today. Get it? Get it? And so does the Lord.
Oh.
Repent, says that person. My
Those little play on
favorite.
words.
My favorite, and I will share you the picture. I'll share the picture with you.
That means I have to get up and walk over.
This is what you want Christian parents to do with their kids.
What is this?
Yeah, what is this is a fair question.
Wait.
I know. She's staring at it because there's a lot happening in this picture of what goes on in a public school classroom, apparently. Would you like...
supposed to be?
I have no freaking idea, but in the image, there is a rainbow flag just flying randomly in the classroom. What
Good
else is
news.
there?
Mikey and I were just talking that we didn't know what we were going to dress up for Halloween for,
Oh, there
and
you
I
go.
found it.
Who's the main character in this picture?
Wolf gentleman?
A wolf gentleman,
It is
yes.
appears to be a human man in a black BLM shirt
Yep.
with the rainbow flag on the shirt sleeve.
That's right.
And then his head, which you would normally expect like a human head to be on top
I
of a
would
human
normally.
body. It's a wolf head, but
Yeah.
it doesn't look like a mask.
And he's staring at you, and he's going to eat
He's
you.
locked and loaded
Yes.
on me. The weird thing, it does not look like a mask. It looks like somebody poorly AI.
Yeah, I agree with you.
But
And
like,
all
it's
of this,
very off-putting to the point that I think I'm going to make it into a painting and hang it on my wall.
all of this is just a bunch of conspiracy-driven crazies who have no clue what happens in public schools.
I have a question.
I mean, my favorite part about the Donald Trump or whoever it was saying in public schools, they will try to turn your kids trans and perform surgery on them. It's like, really? The teacher who can't afford pencils and markers for her classroom is performing surgery now?
Yeah, I got a breast
News.
augmentation in 8th grade. It did
Congratulations.
wonders for my dance
there
career.
you go. And all the while, there are countless Christians who send their kids to public schools, and whatever their fears might be, they discovered really quickly that it's all a lie. Their public schools are fine.
Right.
And where are those people chiming in about all this?
Okay, I'm going to ask you to speculate a little bit with me
Yes.
for a second. So the person who wrote that fucking bananas
Yes,
post,
who is a right-wing conspiracy theorist in general.
Oh, so you know who this person is?
Sadly.
This person is, okay,
I'm
is
online
an
way
established
too much.
figure? Okay. I was going to ask about, like, we learned recently about the Russians paying trolls, yada, yada, yada.
Yes.
So now, like, kind of with that understanding,
I have a comment on that. later.
you... Okay, you do your thing first.
One of the Chris Rufo, one of the propagandists who works with Ron DeSantis on a lot of stuff, is like, my team will pay $5,000 to anyone who could substantiate the immigrants are eating your dog's claim, which is half
So embarrassing.
stupid and half funny because
And half racist.
and half racist because he's being flooded with false claims of all of this hilarious. But I wrote this earlier. I'm like, how do all of these grifters have teams? They always have teams of
You
people.
have teams. They always have so much money.
I know. I'm like, I want a team. And then someone's like, Jessica is your team. I'm like, no. I don't want a co-host. I want minions. These people have minions who just do stuff for them. I'm like, how do they, every single one of them, they're like, my team has found.
What a shitty team you have. It's just me.
That is what the Twitter people did say to me
that's
back.
nice.
They thought I was being mean to you. I'm like, no.
No.
She's my podcast partner. I want like serfs who will bring me coffee and do my shit for me.
You bring me coffee every Wednesday.
I do.
So maybe you're my minion.
I think that's
I guess
correct.
nobody ever considered that I am, in fact,
That
the
you're-
guru of this
you're
situation.
the head of the wolf in this picture.
People have always told me that.
Anyway.
But so to finish my point, which ADD brag, I just came back to it. People who post things like this, do you think they are true internet dum-dums who are just scared
In a
in their
bubble, they
basement,
believe
in
it.
their bubble? Or
Yes.
do you think they are being paid by somebody
No,
to
I
do
think-
this shit? Or do you think they're trolls?
About those right-wing grifters who
Yeah.
got paid upwards of $500,000
What I would do
through
with
a third
$500,000.
party by the Russian government to spread certain lies about like Russia, Ukraine, all that stuff. They insist like, I never got talking points. I was just doing the thing I always do. It's like, buddy, let's say you're right.
Yeah.
Let's say you're doing the thing you always do. And someone says, I want to give you $500,000 to keep doing the thing you are doing. And you didn't change anything, maybe you should rethink the shit you are spreading.
They would have known where that money was coming
No,
from.
I think they're dumb enough to say, well, I guess everyone really loves me. And if they just want to sponsor me and they want to give me money. But my favorite comment on some of those things was, listen, I know the sort of numbers they get on YouTube where it's publicly accessible. We know how many subscribers they have, how many views their videos get. And people chimed in, they're saying like, I have about as many subscribers, I have about as many views as this guy gets, and I know roughly, let's say, I might get a few $1,000s a month from YouTube because I have that sort of base.
Right.
In no world are these things worth $500,000, which is what they were getting paid. And if someone says, I want to give you that sort of money, which is completely out of scope from what you probably are making.
Yes.
The red flag should have gone up. And if these people really didn't know what's happening, then they really are idiots.
Yeah.
And if they didn't know what's happening, well, okay, well then just admit you knew what was going on and that you are right-wing shills.
And did we decide if there are legal consequences?
Consequences for it? I don't know. I didn't
think
follow
there
that.
would
I just know they're all
be.
in denial right now about being pawns. And they include like right-wing grifters, Dave Rubin, Benny Johnson. There's a bunch of right-wing crazies that
Could be a pawn
are
for
basic-
$500,000.
Listen, tell me what I need to do.
Honestly.
Let's talk about something different.
Maybe we can get like an investor for our podcast, and then we can only do this and can stop all of our other stupid work.
Love it. Someone contact us.
Yeah. If you have a lot of money that you want to give to this talent.
Just burning a hole in your pocket. We know how you could spend it. So this is interesting. Churches in Maine are going back to court because they're arguing that non-discrimination laws that they have to follow violate their religious beliefs.
Oh my God, Jesus did love being racist.
Uh-huh.
Jesus hated Mexicans. He
Totally.
always talked about it.
I mean, guy with brown skin really hated the other browns. So let me rewind to give you some backstory on this because we have talked about this before, but it's been a while. I had to refresh my memory on this. In 2022, the Supreme Court heard a case called Carson v. Macon. And basically what it was is Maine has a voucher program that is actually pretty justified. What they say is, obviously, our Constitution says this in Maine, all students have access to a free public education. The problem is a lot of Maine is very rural. There are no public schools in the area. So how do those kids get a free public education? The state says, you know what, if you want to go to a private school that's closer to you, we will pay for it, and with taxpayer dollars. That's what the voucher program does. So fine. And the state says we'll cover private school tuition. That includes church-run schools, as long as the education you get is secular in nature. Like, we don't want to pay for religious indoctrination, but if a Jesuit school wants to sponsor,
Is there a definable line between religious schools that would kind of indoctrinate you versus not? Because I don't know what the difference would be.
Like, Catholic schools, by and large, are probably fine. Like, because they're saying, yeah, we're faith-based, we do some religious stuff, but we are teaching you, we're not spending...
Reading, writing, arithmetic.
Yeah, we're not spending 8 hours a day telling you to read the Bible or something.
I see. Okay.
So,
Thank
a
you.
couple years ago, there was a lawsuit by parents, filed by parents, who wanted to send their kids to a private Christian school that promoted creationism, discriminated against LGBTQ people, and Maine said, you don't get a voucher, not to go to those schools.
Yeah.
So they sued. And the Supreme Court ruled in 2022 that this is religious discrimination. If you're going to allow vouchers, you cannot say, but these schools don't count. All right? Which meant taxpayers would have to pay for religious indoctrination. Sonia Sotomayor, in her dissent, she wrote, "Today, the court leads us to a place where separation of church and state becomes a constitutional violation." So everyone saw that coming a mile away. We knew that's what the Supreme Court was going to do. So this is amazing. Lawmakers in Maine said, all right, we all kind of know what they're going to do here, right? They're going to say we got to use taxpayer dollars to allow kids to go to fundamentalist Christian schools. So they went ahead around the same time as the law was coming out, as the decision was coming down. They're like, well, guess what? We're passing a new rule right after the decision came down that basically said our previous law banned money from going to explicitly religious schools. Well, guess what? That no longer applies because the Supreme Court said so. So we're passing a new law that says taxpayer dollars cannot go to schools that discriminate against people on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity.
Yeah, the girl.
Basically, they just said, we already had that rule in place, but we're going to expand the anti-discrimination law to cover LGBTQ people. And guess what? That also applies to the voucher program.
Love this.
Right? And so what happened after? See, no religion's involved now because they don't mention it anymore. And that move then put those Christian schools at the center of that legal battle. They had to decide, oh, shit, what are we going to do now? We won at the Supreme Court. We could get taxpayer dollars now, but also we're not allowed to discriminate. What matters more to us?
And what they decide.
And the two schools, Temple Academy in the city of Waterville and Bangor Christian Schools in Bangor, they had to make a decision about what mattered more. And both schools told the Supreme Court in their briefs that bigotry is kind of vital to their mission. Like, we are not going to change our positions in order to receive public funding, which is why, Supreme Court, you need to allow us, Maine, to give us taxpayer dollars because we're not changing who we are. And the Supreme Court said,
We love being bigots.
Right.
It's our favorite part of being Christian.
And then Maine changed the law to say, fine, bigots can't receive money. We just said bigots. We didn't say Christians. We just said bigots. And the end result is that by August of 2022, months after the Supreme Court's decision, literally one Christian school had opted into the voucher program, and it was a Jesuit-based school that had nothing to do with the lawsuit.
This is exactly like the Joe Kennedy, was that his name? The coach?
Oh, yeah, Joe Kennedy
Of like,
Washington
I
State.
I want this. And then they
Supreme
get
Court
their
gives it
way
to him.
and they're like, I didn't want this. I don't want to be a football coach.
I'll coach for one game, do my little photo op, and then quit.
What a fucking prick.
So everyone
Hate that
else,
guy.
every other school said, no, we'd rather be bigots than take state dollars. Which
Good
is,
for
by
them.
the way, which is what they were doing already. We didn't need to have this fight. So in March,
how many millions of dollars got spent on this so
now
they
we-
can be like, oh, never mind.
now we cut to March of 2023. The church that runs the Bangor Christian schools, that was part of that Supreme Court lawsuit, the church's name is Crosspoint Church. They filed a lawsuit against the state. And they said, hey, this little change you made in the anti-discrimination law, that includes a poison pill, and this is what they wrote in their lawsuit. This poison pill effectively deters religious schools from participating in the voucher program and thereby perpetuates the religious discrimination at the heart of the sectarian exclusion, which is a lot of words to say something very basic. This Christian church was basically arguing, we want to perpetuate bigotry and we want to get rewarded for it.
Yes.
And they were furious that the state was putting civil rights over their desire to promote faith-based hatred, or as they call it, like sincerely held religious beliefs. And they said this poison pill prevents us from teaching from its religious perspective, as if anti-LGBTQ hate is like core to everything they do, which is weird. They said the law like targeted them. It wasn't generally applicable, which would make it legal because it applies to, certain school, whatever. It's insane.
Truly, they're just raising their hands and saying like, we are bigots.
Yeah. And so this past February, a U.S. district court just shot down the lawsuit. They said the law is fine. It doesn't target you.
The law isn't fine.
It said the church is, quote, unlikely to succeed on the merits. There's nothing inherently anti-religious about non-discrimination laws that apply to everyone.
Yeah.
And these laws regulate conduct, not speech or belief. So if the Christians running the school want to be bigots, that's fine.
Interesting.
If they want to believe trans people don't exist, being gay is a sin, that's fine. You're still allowed to do that. But the only way you can get taxpayer dollars is if you promise not to, like if you're going to say, we're not going to admit you into our school because you're gay or trans or something, or if your parents are that way, now it's conduct. And that's what the law says you can't do. So it's not religious discrimination because they're not saying you can't believe any of this stuff. But even the judge in that ruling said, listen, I know you people are going to appeal, so we'll let the appellate courts figure this one out. Wow. And this week, First Liberty Institute, a right-wing legal group, they filed the appeal where they basically say Maine's non-discrimination law violates the free exercise and free speech clauses of the First Amendment. They're saying excluding the Bangor Christian schools from the tuition voucher program is a feature of the amended statute, not a bug, like you were going after us.
Yeah, dog, we're trying to protect queer people.
Yeah.
What do you think our job is?
And by the way, with this lawsuit, there's actually another group that's filing a similar lawsuit that's coalescing with this one. And this one's filed by the Roman Catholic Diocese of Portland. And they're saying, yeah, we want in on this too because we want the ability to hold our bigoted beliefs and get tuition dollars.
I forgot there was a Portland, Maine for a second and was so deeply confused.
I've
been to Portland, Maine.
The First Circuit Appellate Court, where they are filing their appeal, it's one of the only appellate courts in the country with 0 Trump nominees on the bench.
Really?
So maybe there's hope here. But whatever, I kind of like it when there's a lawsuit that involves Christian groups shouting their bigotry from the rooftops.
Listen, I love the quiet part out loud. Yeah. And there's no way to say anything besides, like, we hate gay people, and why do you make us pretend they exist? I hate it.
Yeah. I got so mad. One other story that's along the same tracks, and this is also an update because there's another legal update. But get this. We talked about this. It's been maybe another year and a half since this. In early 2023, there was a high school called Mid-Vermont Christian School, and even though it's a private Christian school, the state of Vermont, they have an athletic association that organizes like state championships for football and all the other sports and activities. Well, they allow private Christian schools and private schools in general to get access to the competition, whatever their contract is. But they say, yeah, sure, you can compete. And it's a way to make sure those kids also get access to good competition. So in early 2023, Mid-Vermont Christian School, they were the number 12 seed to play against some number 5 public ranked school in the basketball brackets.
Okay.
This is like a Division 4 bracket. It's not a big school, but in the small school bracket for the high school girls basketball state championship, the Christian school was in the mix. And so they're number 12. They're playing the number 5 seed. The game's about to start. Mid-Vermont Christian School says, we're not playing this other team.
I forgot
Why not?
I forgot what sport we're talking about. Basketball?
Girls basketball.
Girls basketball.
They're not playing the other team because, quote, according to the head of their school.
Is there a lesbian on a basketball team? Because that's never happened.
We withdrew from the tournament, says head of school Vicky Fogg, because we believe playing against an opponent with a biological male jeopardizes the fairness of the game and the safety of our players. They had a trans student on
The
the other team.
safety of our players.
Uh-huh.
This high school or junior high?
High school.
High school.
Now,
okay.
how would a trans athlete impact the safety? No one knew. There was no record of this player hurting anybody in
It's
any
just
other
Dwayne
game.
Wade with a wig on. They're like, I don't know.
Right. And like so many right-wing bigots, this head of school used so many buzzwords and never went into details. Like research has shown there is no consistent evidence showing trans athletes have a competitive advantage in women's sports. And more importantly, this is low-level girls' high school. It's not even professional where they have sets standards of like who's allowed to play, when they can, when they can't, where it's more regulated. But like, this is meant to be fun. You want to celebrate the journey, not the outcomes. And for all the supposed concerns this lady had about threats to women's sports, by forfeiting the game,
She took
that
the
Christian
opportunity
school,
away for her kids to play.
for her kids to play, for the other kids to play too. And by the way, the team they were playing against, they had a 14-6 record with that trans player on the team, hardly undefeated.
Yeah.
And guess what? Even though they automatically advanced to the next round of the bracket, they lost the next game by like a lot. So what are you complaining about? This is not a surprise. Anyway,
It's because this is the first time any of these people have actually come face to face with the reality. Because for all their fear mongering, none of them have ever met a trans person
Oh, of
that they're
course not.
aware of.
and so this is where it gets kind of optimistic for a second. The people running the tournament were like, what do we do about this? And the group overseeing the tournament, the state-sanctioned group overseeing the tournament, is actually the Vermont Principals Association. And they said, we have inclusive policies. We have a zero
it's
tolerance
fucking Vermont.
policy when it comes to discrimination based on a student's actual or perceived sex and gender. And so
Wait, or perceived sex and gender. That's interesting.
yeah, but they have a zero tolerance policy when it comes to discrimination. And even though the Christian school forfeit the game before they learned about any of this.
Oh my God.
So they didn't need to take immediate action. But like 2 weeks later, they said, you know what? Mid-Vermont Christian School, they don't get to participate in our league.
Good.
And it was a unanimous vote of their 15-member committee. Wasn't
Good.
even a hard call. They said, we have a non-discrimination policy.
You violated it.
You violated it.
Bye.
So the punishment, and by the way, they also said this is not a one-off. We're never going to do this. So they said, if you can't abide by our rules in our league, and this is actually what the executive director said at the time, if you don't want to follow VPA rules, that's fine. But then you're just not a VPA member.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So what did the Christian school do after that? They pretended they were being
sued?
persecuted.
Yeah.
And they announced plans to appeal that decision. Not a lawsuit, but they said, we're going to appeal it. The lady who runs the school said, canceling our membership is not a solution and does nothing to deal with the very real issue of safety and fairness facing women's sports in our beloved state.
That sounds like she did not learn her lesson.
And then they sued state officials for not accepting their anti-trans beliefs. So last November, the right-wing legal group Alliance Defending Freedom, they filed that lawsuit on behalf of the school and two families. They said the state violated the school's First Amendment rights, quote, by preventing them from practicing their religious beliefs about sexuality and gender.
I don't think basketball is a religious right. I don't think it is.
What are they talking about? It's about the right to be bigots.
Yeah.
They're never suing like, we have a right to feed the homeless,
such
damn
assholes,
it. No, it's
truly.
always about the right to be bigots.
I also-
By the way, they could have formed their own Christian Bigot League and organized events with other like-minded
The
Christian bigot
CBL.
schools. Yeah. But they demanded entry into the public league even though they don't want to play by the rules.
We want to discriminate against your kids, not our kids.
Right. Like the Christian school chose this route, not the state. The state was being generous enough by giving private schools the ability to compete
Right.
in the mix. And their lawsuit cited Supreme Court decisions that said like the one I just mentioned in the last story, that said if a state offers certain benefits to public schools, they cannot deny those benefits to private schools. The lawsuit failed to note that in the case of the Macon case we talked about last time, Maine lawmakers passed a law forbidding taxpayer dollars from being used for discrimination. But in Vermont, the Christian school wanted access to the state benefits without following the state's non-discrimination rules. Like, you don't have to be a lawyer to grasp how you can't cite that lawsuit because we're talking about different issues.
Yeah.
You want to violate the state's non-discrimination laws.
Right.
That's not what that case was about. The lawsuit also said that the Vermont Agency of Education in 2022 passed laws requiring all private schools that want taxpayer dollars to obey non-discrimination laws. And they clearly did not want to do that.
Yeah.
And so they made it clear, like, we want our cake and we want to eat it too.
I also think it's worth noting, and I've said this before, I just think it's really fucked up that we have gotten to a point in our culture that sports, and specifically winning at sports and being the best at sports, has so critically overshadowed what should be, in my opinion, the point of sports, which is physical activity, teamwork, hand-eye coordinate, all that good stuff. And like, yeah, winning is good and being at the top of your game is good. But when you're talking about 20 high schools, most of them are not going to win. Maybe we should be teaching them that, like, playing a game
overcoming adversity.
Well, playing a game for its own sake is enough. Like, I truly got in an argument with somebody about the whole, like, participation trophies thing. And I said, and I'll say again, I never showed horseback riding growing up. I was good, and I think I could have. And I'm grateful for that, because I am so fucking competitive that it would have sucked the joy clean out of it for me. And I know there's tons of kids who the joy gets sucked. I mean, do you think Olympic athletes all love their sport still? Or do you think that's all they know how to do? But you know what I mean? Like, the point of sports isn't, let's find out who's the best 16-year-old basketball player in Vermont. The point of sports is to...
Truly the NBA's first round. The reason I'm bringing this up is earlier this year, I believe, a judge dismissed the request of this lawsuit, basically saying these rules are applied across the board. They weren't discriminating against you, whatever. And now they are appealing that decision. This week, they filed a brief with the Second Circuit Court of Appeals saying this is religious discrimination. And in their lawsuit, or in their appeal, they say the league allowed other teams to forfeit without penalty. And their examples are like, well, during the pandemic, there was a student who had a mask exemption, and one team said, we're not going to play against that team. And they said those teams that didn't want to play, so they forfeited, they were not kicked out of the league. But one, that doesn't violate non-discrimination rules. That's a health and safety issue.
Yeah.
And there's no reason to believe those rules were not applied fairly. Like, if a Christian school said, we're not going to play for that reason, they would not have been penalized for it either. So I don't get the argument there.
It's because they cannot accept the fact that they're wrong and they're the bad guys. They will never accept, like, we're the baddies.
They also say the Vermont Principals Association harbored hostility toward the Christian school by kicking them out. And here's how they did it.
I think they're the hostile ones.
Their argument came with a heavy dose of transphobia, because they write in the appeal, the VPA has only applied its newfound forfeiture justifies expulsion policy to religious schools that cannot compete against males who identify as female.
Nice.
You're singling us out, in other words.
Well, you guys are the only ones being bigots, so I'm not sure.
And that's the thing. They're not kicked out for being Christian. They're kicked out for being assholes. And the law has said you can't be assholes on these issues. And so if you want to be a Christian
school... That'd be my only law if I were a queen. Don't be an asshole for fucking once.
I know. Anytime there's like a... What's the atheist version of the Ten Commandments? It's like, just don't be
a dick for fucking once. Be chill. That's what my commandments are.
I do think it's important to mention in this lawsuit, lost in the shuffle are all the student athletes at that Christian school who are now deprived of the chance to showcase their skills, earn possible scholarships, all because the people running their school decided hate needed to be prioritized over competition, because the administrators have made clear they don't care about students anyway.
There's no love like Christian hate.
Yep. So the school chose this path.
Too bad.
They need to accept it.
That's a sad story.
Sure. I mean, it'll be sad if they end up.
I thought we were almost done.
There's one last thing I wanted to bring up here.
You've said one last thing 15 times.
There are 7 more stories.
When do the lies stop?
No, there was a study published recently in the Journal for the Scientific Study of Religion that I found very interesting.
Journal for the Scientific Study of Religion.
There are so many journals, peer-reviewed journals.
Is that pro or anti?
They cover everything. They cover everything.
Sending. I guess I don't understand.
If you cover religion, we want to know about it.
But in a scientific.
Yeah. Can you quantify it? Here's the deal. We already know Christian nationalism is dangerous.
Yeah.
We also know that the belief that we should be a Christian nation, however you want to define that, That is a statement accepted by roughly 45% of Americans, including 81% of white evangelicals.
Those fucking dum-dums have such a lack of understanding about the foundation of our country that literally they saw a painting and were like, I guess that's what it looked like. He was there. He made that painting. Wait, no, he
So
wasn't.
here's the question that these researchers wanted to know. Is the concept of Christian nationalism physically dangerous to people?
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and this is where you get into the scientific study of religion. It's not pro or against religion. It's what do we know about religious people? Things like that. So you might assume, given how Christian
Now I'm
nationalists, they probably oppose gun safety measures. They support Donald Trump and his attempted insurrection.
They drive gigantic fucking trucks.
They do. There's overlap between Christian nationalists and right-wing militias.
Didoy.
And it's not ambiguous in surveys.
That
In
overlap is a circle.
a 2023 survey found that 40% of Christian nationalists felt political violence was acceptable to save the country, which is 7 times as large compared to people who reject Christian nationalism.
That's good.
So what these researchers
Mike
tried
makes
to
right.
do...
I think that's what they
Yeah.
said, and everybody thought that was
It's
a
what
really
Jesus
good idea.
said. Yes, that's a Jesus original. These researchers attempted to find a link, or is there one, between politicians who embrace Christian nationalism and violence against people who disagree.
In their area?
What they did
okay, you explain
is they studied what U.S. senators specifically, because they apply not to one community, but they represent the whole state. What if we look at the statements made by U.S. senators, pro-Christian nationalist statements they have made, and examine if there was more violence by Christians against non-Christians in their states as a result.
Wow, okay. All right, I'm in.
And their
hearing
argument
it.
is when politicians affirm the idea that a country belongs to a particular religious group, their beneficiaries may arrive at the reasonable conclusion that the state implicitly approves of discrimination, harassment, and even violence against non-privileged faith.
Sure, because I would say if they believe that, then anybody who is not white Christian is now your enemy.
Yeah. And they said, given present trends, Christians will no longer enjoy unquestioned social and political supremacy in the future, which is true. They pointed out, like, everyone from neo-Nazi Nick Fuentes to evangelical preacher James Dobson have said versions of the nation's changing demographics, quote, will take us down if we don't deal with it.
They do hate brown people.
Right? And the researchers pointed out the mass shooter in El Paso, Texas in 2019, he echoed Trump's anti-immigrant rhetoric. And his also Trump's anti-Muslim messaging led to a failed, thankfully, bomb plot against a Kansas mosque in 2016.
Jesus.
So the researchers say Hindu extremists in India, they have waged violence
Yeah.
against minorities in India,
Yeah.
which guess what? The BJP party led by Modi, they promote Hindu nationalism, and that has had consequences. So the question is, what happens when U.S. senators like Ted Cruz say things like, quote, any president who doesn't begin every day on his knees praying isn't fit to be commander-in-chief of this nation? Like, that's a Christian nationalist argument
Also,
that you can only allow.
You guys, you know better than to say start your day on your knees. Like, this is
I know,
junior
phrasing.
high bullshit.
The researchers, I'm going to skip through their methodology, which is complicated, and how they found all this, and I'm not the guy you want explaining that.
If
But
it's
here's what it came
peer-reviewed,
down
I
to.
guess.
Here's what it came down to. Their ratios indicated that, quote, states where senators articulated support for Christian nationalism recorded between 1.4 and 1.5 times the number of Christian nationalist attacks in their areas.
Wow.
And basically what they say is the public expression of Christian nationalist sentiments on the part of American senators is positively and robustly associated with greater attacks by Christians against non-Christians. In no cases was the Christian nationalism variable found to be statistically insignificant.
Wow.
Basically saying, we know this violence is happening. It's recorded.
And now we have-
And we know Christian nationalism. You could blame that on a number of things, but at no point is Christian nationalism not significant in the work we are doing here.
Listen, when I see a dude drive around with a sticker in his back window that has like a bunch of assault rifles and says like, this is my family, Yeah, I think that guy is prone to violence.
Dr. Sam Perry is one of the foremost experts on Christian nationalism. He's written books about it. He's kind of the go-to person when people define Christian nationalism. I asked him what he thought about this study, and he pointed out, like, okay, it doesn't prove that Christian nationalism is what's causing the violence.
It's a correlation, not causation.
It's a correlation, but he did say quote, it nonetheless establishes a robust association between Christian nationalist rhetoric among political elites and instances of actual violence perpetrated by self-described Christians against religious minorities in the states of those politicians.
See, this is what happens when you follow the evidence. I have always thought that Christian nationalists were dangerous and scary.
Now they are.
And now I found a study that verifies it.
Yeah.
Instead of if we found a study that was like Christian nationalists are doing the most charity work and give the most money and are the least violent among everybody. And then I would have to really reconsider why I think the things I think.
A few steps above J.D. Vance parroting lies about immigrants in Ohio.
Oh my God. So wild.
So, I mean, look, we know Christian nationalist rhetoric is bad for democracy. Now we know it can exacerbate violence against religious minorities. And here's the thing. Senators who represent states ought to be unifying forces, no matter their political views.
Sure.
Yet many Republican senators specifically have sought to turn Christians against non-Christians in the name of patriotism. And they should be called out on it. I wish voters would reject their faith-based divisiveness. They're not, but I wish they would. But I found that very interesting.
Very interesting.
I think I'm done.
Yeah?
What are we going to talk about in the bonus?
I really want to talk about a show on Netflix that I devoured called Chaos. It is a Greek mythology take, and it's incredible and beautiful. And I discovered my new Hollywood crush. It was very embarrassing because I fell for another generic white guy. Apologies. We'll talk about that. This weekend, if anybody's in Chicago, going to be at the Cobra Lounge. My husband's buddies in the 90s and aughts were in punk bands. And so we're going to go see a bunch of 45-year-old guys relive their glory days. I think it's going to be a ton of fun. And I'm going to, I think, a horse show tomorrow.
Oh, you said there was
Wednesday.
something else you were going to discuss with us.
There was something else I was going to discuss with you.
Forbearance.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yes.
I want to talk a little bit about, I know this is boring, but just coming out of Mikey being out of work and all that stuff, I want to talk a little bit about like the financial aspect of stuff when you lose a job. And I think I used to write for a financial thing, and so I knew a little bit more, and so I knew some of our options, and I don't know that everybody does. So I want to talk a little bit more about that.
Support the show by going to patreon.com/friendlyatheistpodcast. Leave us a review. Join the Facebook and Discord, and we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.
Bye.